Systems thinking. The systems view looks at the world in terms of relationships and integration. Systems are integrated wholes whose properties cannot be reduced to those of smaller units. Instead of concentrating on basic building blocks or basic substances, the systems approach emphasizes basic principles of organization. Every organism, from the smallest bacterium through the wide range of plants and animals to humans, is an integrated whole and thus a living system. But systems are not confined to individual organisms and their parts. The same aspects of wholeness are exhibited by social systems, an anthill, a beehive, or a human family, and by ecosystems that consist of a variety of organisms and inanimate matter in mutual interaction. What is preserved in a wilderness area is not individual trees or organisms, but a complex web of relationships between them. All these natural systems are wholes whose specific structures arise from the interactions and interdependence of their parts. The activity of the systems involves a process known as transaction, the simultaneous and mutually independent interaction between multiple components. Now that we've provided background on systems, I'd like to further the introduction to systems. We'll discuss some characteristics of systems, and then I'll provide a couple examples of systems thinking, the engineering perspective, which includes the water and energy nexus, and an anthropology perspective that looks at the integration of water, culture, and religion.
Introduction to Systems Thinking. In this video, we'll define a dynamic system. We'll look at how that system is distinguished from its surroundings, and we'll examine the cause of a system's behavior. Systems thinking is a way of considering the whole rather than isolated parts of the system. Sustainable design requires that the designer be able to think holistically or use systems thinking. This graphic introduces the concept of a dynamic system. Dynamic means, of course, that the system is changing with time. We consider a system to be a group of interacting components. Remember that a system is really a concept designed by those who are analyzing the system. It's not something real, it's really an idea. And here, the system is represented as a circle with a boundary. Again, the boundary is a concept of the system that we've designed as the analyst. The surroundings refers to everything outside of the system. So, again, the system is a concept that represents a group of interacting components, and the language that we use is that we have a boundary which differentiates between the system and the surroundings. Okay, I bet you're familiar with this system. Now notice we have a system boundary around the hand and the slinky, and you know the slinky bounces up and down when the hand is removed. Now my question is, what causes the slinky to behave the way it did? Is it the hand at the bottom that moved so that the slinky could drop from gravity? Is it gravity? Is it something about the spring itself? Is it the hand at the top? In a systems view, you'd say, gosh, it's everything working together that's causing the system to function as it's functioning. We can ask ourselves, if any one of the components of the system were eliminated, would the results be the same? And if the answer is no, then you know that really it's all elements functioning together that create behavior of the system. Okay, let's summarize. A dynamic system is a set of interconnected components that are changing in time. Systems are mental models whose boundaries are defined by the analyst. The behavior of a system is caused by all elements, their nature, and their interaction with one another. In the next few slides, we will go over 4 key system properties. The first 2 are depicted here and refer to the nature of the system. Interdependency indicates the degree of interconnectedness among the subsystems within the system. A spider's web is often a highly interconnected system. If you tug on one part of the web, the tug will be felt throughout the system. Redundancy is the extent to which there are duplicate paths within the system to produce the same result. Compact disks oftentimes have 4 redundant tracks of the same information so that if there's a speck of dust on one of the bits, there are 3 others which can provide the same information. This is an example of redundancy. The capacity of the system depends on where the system boundary is placed. It also depends on the properties of the system itself. The capacity refers to the productivity of the system. This next property, resiliency, describes the ability of the system to adapt to changes or perturbations in the surroundings. In general, greater redundancy should produce greater resiliency. For example, if the telephone lines to a building are somehow cut, but the building is still connected to the internet, the communication system with the outside world is resilient. However, the trade-off is that you are using more resources to achieve the same result. So these are the 4 properties: interdependency, redundancy, capacity, and resiliency. These 4 qualities describe the nature of a system.
Now that we have a background in systems thinking, I'd like to give a couple of examples of applied systems thinking. From the engineering side, I'd like to look at the water-energy nexus, and from the anthropology side, the cultural information flows. So for energy production in a centralized plant, it's produced at a power plant. That energy is transmitted long distances over high-tension power lines. And from there, it's stepped down in a locality through a transformer substation, and then it's piped through lines to the local residences, where it is then used for a variety of purposes, primarily heating and cooling. So these system elements, the power plant, distribution network, consumers, form complex relationships with information and material flows between them. And these complex relationships drive electrical energy production and distribution, creating hourly, daily, seasonal variations in energy demand. So the electrical power generation sector does not exist in isolation. Large-scale centralized power production facilities require vast amounts of cooling water, which makes them particularly vulnerable to water scarcity, competition, drought, or climate change. And you can see here that surface water flows through thermoelectric cooling plants is a significant usage in the US, and the water embedded in energy is not just for cooling plants, it's across the life cycle of the resource extraction, from mining, processing, transportation, energy production. So energy production is water intensive, and water production is energy intensive. Significant inputs are required for water treatment and wastewater treatment. And this leads to some interesting questions from a systems perspective. What is the implications of water scarcity and climate change? What are the implications of price changes? One method that we can use to look at these questions is system dynamic modeling that takes a look at the individual elements, the relationships between those elements, and you can study the behavior of that system over time. This is just one small portion of a systems dynamic model that examines just such a system, the water energy nexus. A graduate student at the University of South Florida, Yilin Zhang, has created this model to examine the interaction and behavior of the water energy nexus system, looking at various sectors' impact on energy demand. These sectors include municipal, water, agriculture, residential, and she's looking at the trade-offs in energy demand, energy production, supply, and their relationship with water. And now I'd like to introduce a different perspective on systems thinking in anthropology, and it has to do with Bali rice farm. The Balinese rice farmers have been working the same paddies for close to 1,000 years. These elaborate paddies are terraced into the hillsides, covering a significant portion of the arable land on the island nation, and are serviced by a complex network of irrigation canals and small dams. All of this complex rice production is governed by the Puratitra, a type of water temple controlled by religious authorities that not only manage the production of rice, but control the cycles of rice planting and harvesting. So the elements in this system, the rice paddies, the irrigation network, the farmers themselves, and the religious structures responsible for coordinating the cycles of planting and harvesting, have shown to be remarkably effective in creating a system of sustainable agriculture. So the interaction between the system components, the rice paddies, the farmers who use them, the religious authorities who coordinate the rice planting and harvest, have evolved over time in a complex adaptive system and have shown that coordinated planting actually reduces the amount of pesticides and predation by pests on the rice harvest by depriving the pests of any food supply in the fallow period post-harvest. Human ecosystem modeling is a tool similar to systems dynamic modeling and is used to sort of gain a big picture perspective of a complex adaptive system. Eric Cohen, a master's student in anthropology at the University of South Florida, created this human ecosystem graphic of the Subic, which is one region of the Balinese rice paddies. And it covers a whole system's perspective from geology, topography, hydrology, the management of the canals and weirs, the religious authorities responsible for rice cultivation and harvesting, and it goes all the way down to marketing and food production. In summary, systems thinking recognizes individual system elements and focuses on their interaction. And these two factors, the elements and interactions, contribute to system behavior. It's important to note that systems thinking tools are not designed to be predictive, but are well suited to provide a deeper understanding of the system under study. Systems thinking allows for a better understanding of the complex and dynamic relationships among systems and facilitates the investigation of potential consequences of system change with new policies, technologies, operating practices, or values. Systems thinking relies on understanding the linkages and interactions both within and among systems, which generally involves cyclical feedback loops rather than linear cause and effect relationships.